China, influence of China.
For 33 years, foreign ministers have made Africa.
China was in the spotlight this week as Senegal hosted the 2020.
Between China and Africa has been growing in recent years, with African countries signing numerous collaborative agreements with the Asian economic giant.
China is the continent's largest trading partner, but Africa exports way less to China than China exports to Africa.
Welcome back, folks. Today, we have an eye-opening topic that's been making waves across the African continent. China's increasing influence in Africa. This has become a subject of intense debate and scrutiny. In this video, we will highlight China's control over major sector and infrastructure projects to its expanding presence in the public security sector. Join us as we explore the complex dynamics between China and Africa. First, let's discuss the extreme control of Chinese companies in major sectors across Africa. Did you know that there are more than 10,000 active Chinese firms in Africa? That's right, and they are making their mark in some crucial industries. Take the example of construction. 20% of those 10,000 Chinese firms are in construction, and according to The Economist, they win around half of all African construction-related business. That's a staggering statistic. But that's not all. Chinese investment has transformed the economic landscape in Lesotho, where the clothing industry has become the largest sector, all thanks to Chinese companies. Ever heard of cobalt? It's a vital mineral for electrical vehicle production, and Congo happens to be the hub for it. Here is a shocking fact. Until 2020, China owned 15 out of the 19 cobalt production mines, dominating the sector and controlling over 80% of the mines. To provide you some perspective, the state officials of Congo recently realized that they were at the losing end of these mining contracts. The president of Congo said, and I quote, "The contract was badly drawn up and that Congo had derived no benefit from it." Now, let's talk numbers. Foreign direct investment measures global investment indication in a particular region. Brace yourselves, because China's foreign direct investment in 2020
stood at a whopping $4 billion.
higher than the United States. Can you believe that? Just think about it. From a mere 75 million in 2003
to $4 billion in 2020.
Trade is another crucial factor that indicates the proximity of the two regions. In 2021, China and Africa had trading volume of 254 billion, 4 times higher than the trade between the United States and Africa. But wait, here is a twist. Chinese businesses have recognized the immense potential of the African market and are now coming to serve the local market itself. They are building African brands that align with the African culture and values. African population is projected to be 2.5 billion by 2050. That will be a whole new game for China. Take Transsion, for instance. It's a Chinese electronic manufacturing company that offers smartphones for as less as $20, tailored for the African market. They even have camera-adjusted exposure for darker skin. And guess what? Today, almost half of Africa's smartphone market is captured by Transsion. Now folks, that is some serious dominance. But wait, now let's discuss China's involvement in public security institutions across Africa. China's influence in Africa's public security sector has grown due to the favorable economic environment it has cultivated over the years. It is important to note that African nations largely refrain from bilateral military engagements with Europe and North America. However, they consider China a serious security partner. This has enabled China to expand its influence in Africa's security landscape, and it has conducted various joint military engagements. In the same spirit, African nations increasingly chose China to send their police officers for further training through initiatives like International Law Enforcement Program, which has trained thousands of police officers. Furthermore, due to the extensive involvement of the African nations in Belt and Road Initiative, many Chinese citizens actively work in Africa. Under the guise of protecting its citizens and its assets, China has also been successful in interfering with the local police and law enforcement work in the host countries such as Congo and Ethiopia. The most alarming indication out of all this is that China's Ministry of Public Security supervises all overseas police and law enforcement cooperation initiatives. This means it has access to all public security sensitive data on other African nations. Now, let's shift gears and discuss China's investment in major African public infrastructure project. The Chinese Development Bank has strengthened China's influence in the region over the past 2 decades. Through loans totaling over $148 billion, China has supported large-scale mining projects and infrastructure development, including the construction of roads and extensive electrical networks. What's intriguing is that China employs 90% of local hires, further solidifying its influence. This amount of monetary impact gives an unparalleled edge to China to have political and social influence across Africa. But here's where things get concerning. China has known to lend money for projects that may never be financially viable. Kenya's standard gauge railway project is a prime example. It accounts for a staggering 68% of Kenya's bilateral debt, raising questions about its economic viability and China's intentions. Critics even point to this as an example of China's debt trap diplomacy at play. Debt distress is becoming a real issue for some African nations. Countries like Chad, the Republic of Congo, Mozambique, Somalia, and even Sudan are struggling to pay even the interest on their loans. However, China continues to expand its projects in Africa. In 2021 alone, China invested $4.3 billion in Ethiopia as part of its Belt and Road Initiative, increasing China's foreign direct investment in East Africa by 35%. This demonstrates China's unwavering commitment to solidifying its influence in Africa, even in the face of mounting debt concerns. Finally, let's address the controversial aspect: China's track record of overtaking nations' assets to solidify its political and economic control.
Sri Lanka took loans from several countries. This pushed Sri Lanka to its worst economic crisis.
Chinese research and survey vessel Yuan Wang 5 has docked at Sri Lanka's Hambantota port.
While China claims to offer assistance without any ulterior motives, the reality tells a completely different story. Take the example of Sri Lanka, which borrowed 1.5 billion from China in 2021 to build a deep water port. Unfortunately, the project did not generate significant revenue, leading Sri Lanka to struggle with debt repayment. As a result, in 2017, China took control of the port and signed a debt for equity swap agreement. This granted China control over the port for the next 99 years. This now means that China has unequivocal control over the port that was once sovereign to Sri Lanka. Most importantly, critics note that Chinese government plans to use that port for strategic military purposes. Now, let me take you back to Kenya's standard gauge railway project that we previously discussed. Due to the limited scope and the revenue generated from the project, Kenya was not in a position to pay the debt back. Shortly after, rumors started to surface that China is seeking control to take Kenya's port revenue and assets as collateral for that project. Kenyan officials clarified that Kenya's port were not listed as collateral, but Kenya has signed a sovereignty immunity waiver, a standard provision to gain Chinese loan contracts. All of these examples emphasize China's profound impact and involvement in Africa, spanning various sectors from construction and mining to infrastructure and public security. Thank you for joining us, and as we conclude, it is essential to approach this topic with a critical lens. China's presence in Africa is undeniably significant, and the relationship between China and Africa is constantly evolving. Thus, it's crucial for us to take a closer look and assess the potential benefits and risks at stake. Stay tuned for more thought-provoking content, and until next time, keep questioning and keep exploring.